Hi, everybody. My name's Ariadne A, and I'm a South Dakota Arts Council roster artist. I've got a couple projects, and today I wanted to talk to you about Spiritual Stained Glass Project. Let me share my screen and show you what I mean. So, art and religious purposes or practices has been around since human beings have been around. We make things beautiful and precious, and that enhances our experience of life. This first example of stunning stained glass is from Saint-Chapelle in Paris. And when you look at these tall, slender windows with the colored glass in these very ornate designs and the pointed architecture that creates these vaulted spaces, it's been described as looking like a jewel box because of its great detail and beauty. There are thousands of scenes depicted within, or pictures depicted within these stained glass windows. And that's typical of its early use in medieval times. Back in that day, people didn't know how to read or write. And instead, a lot of information was communicated through pictures or images. And so in this case, there are scenes from Old and New Testaments, and they speak to about how long it would take to create something like this. In the case of this structure, it was 7 years. In other cathedrals, it might take hundreds of years or even a couple generations of people, of families, in order to create it. And there's something about investing all that time in structures for people to gather in that make them exalted, that set them apart from maybe a more simple structure that we use to live or to work in. Oh, I apologize for the picture being pixelated, but a second example of stunning stained glass masterpieces could be the Palo della Musica, or the music hall of this church. And you can see by the stained glass ceiling and the skylight above and the side windows, they talk about drawing your attention in, and the warmth with the cool colors resemble drops of water and honey. Certainly it's an all-consuming space, and that's what's extraordinary about some of these structures that have been built to enhance a spiritual or an aesthetic, an artistic experience. The third example, and I'm taking this from an exhibition called Dallas to Barcelona, Stained Glass Masterpieces. Excuse my pronunciation, Santiago Dom Bosco, located in Brazil. This is a sanctuary of floor-to-ceiling stained glass, shades of purple and blue. So this is a more contemporary piece, but you can see the great effect that it has of creating a certain color of light and volume when you enter in and stay in the space. And that's typical of these spiritual or contemplative spaces, in that they're designed for folks to stay quite a while and interpret, feel, communicate, and learn in these spaces. One of the more famous examples from Europe is the Charts Cathedral, created first in 1194, although that was a sacred site for many generations prior to this building. And over its lifetime, there have been a few fires. One was just a year ago, and fortunately, the French people have rallied and put together the resources to repair the damages. The most famous of the stained glass within the Charts Cathedral is the rose window, which is dedicated to the Holy Virgin Mary, and the tree of Jesse. And because this is a Roman Catholic cathedral, they're communicating and illuminating the sacred mysteries of the Old Testament and the New Testament. And you know, that's the point of experiencing these pictures, the beauty and the complexity of these buildings. You can see, well, there's a lot you could talk about with the Charts Cathedral, but I'll keep it to the glass. But you know, just in its detail and complexity, it's speaking to something greater than an individual. And certainly the height, the beauty, and the color of these stained glass windows really impact a person's experience and raises our eyes and our hearts to the sky and to our Creator. I wanted to also show a contemporary work of art from Damian Hurst, one of many artists that have been informed by this tradition of stained glass. I mean, we still see contemporary stained glass in our spaces today, but this one is unusual. You can see that some of the form looks very window-like, and you can see some of these Gothic pointed arches in the way this is designed. Another feature that's borrowed from stained glass is the high detail in color and the luminous or shiny quality of the surface. And the last thing I would mention is the symmetry, in that one side of the piece is a mirror image or close to as another. It's not always the case in stained glass, but symmetry certainly can be a part of it. The thing that might not be obvious at first glance is the entire piece, Posterity, the Holy Place, is made from butterflies, which is, you know, a whole nother conversation in and of itself. The beauty, the care, the tending that it took to create this piece is really what elevates it into not only a masterpiece, but certainly something to talk about. So I'll leave that for another time. Let's talk about this hands-on project, Spiritual Stained Glass. The supplies are pretty straightforward in that you'll need a pencil and some blank paper, and hopefully you have a watercolor, which is pretty simple to get, and some white glue, and you'll also need some kind of black acrylic paint. It doesn't have to be artist grade at all. It's just we're going to darken the white glue and with the black paint. The first thing we do, though, is we're going to make a design on our piece of paper, and it can be It could be geometric, only shapes, triangles, hearts, circles, etc. Or it could be symbols from your life and your own spiritual experience, because that's the subject of this artwork. We're going to design a simple drawing that could be organized symmetrically, but it's about communicating your own spiritual experience. What makes you feel good? What brings your mind and your heart upward or connected to your creator? So when I'm starting this, I'm going to fold my piece of paper in half just so I can, even if it doesn't turn out to be perfectly symmetrical, I can kind of keep an eye on what I'm doing. And what I'll do now is stop sharing. I'm going to pause, and I'm going to just start quietly thinking about shapes and simple outlined maybe symbols. I'm thinking sunshine or plants, or certainly the cross is a traditional symbol of Christian spirituality. It can be from your own culture, and it can be from your own experience. So the good news is there's no right or wrong answer. This could be one of many that you do on the subject. It's an idea to stop and get quiet and create a design that can express this spiritual feeling or experience that you have. Keep in mind, when you're drawing, there are going to be simple outlines of shapes, because the goal is to eventually trace the outline with a glue that's been darkened with black paint, and that is similar to the lead that holds this stained glass, the colored glass within a window. And then once that dries, we're going to color it in with the watercolor. So that's the trajectory of where we're going with this. Let me pause and I'll come back to take a look at the drawing. Okay, hello again. Let's see if you can see this. Yeah, so there is some symmetry in this drawing. It started out with a heart shape right in the center and some rays. I think if you did this every day for a week, the drawing would be different every day. But in this case, I started to erase, and then I decided, well, what if, so like this line I started to erase because it wasn't the same size on this side. Well, what if I just went with it and then just added things that were similar to each side? And it started to emerge this sort of Gothic shape, and then I followed it again to make a thicker outline. And then I knew that in addition to my religious beliefs, I could also bring in some things about nature and about growth, because for me, my practice has not been the same my whole life. It includes times of growth and then times of quiet and rest, and then other times where it's very, very I'd say strong and very, very driven. So long story short, I put things in like leaves growing larger. I've got the sort of a little rose shape coming, which has its own symbols, as does wheat. And I'm going to stop there because If you also have some watercolor paper, that would be ideal now to transfer the drawing, redraw it a second time, because it's going to be a little different, but often you might add or you might do things a little bit more satisfying. The watercolor paper is going to absorb the paint in a different way. It's got a little heavier girth, and it's got some elements that makes it hold the water. If you have plain paper and that's what you want to work with, you go ahead. If you want to redraw it on a flat sheet of paper, the one that's folded was considered your practice and your design. So I'm going to pause again, redraw it, and I'll get back to you. Okay, so from that first drawing, I sketched out on the watercolor paper, and a few things I want you to notice. In some cases, I made things bigger, I added things, I took a couple things out. In your design, what's going to make it great for stained glass is that the shapes are somewhat large, but everything has to be connected. So I drew all the way out to the edge. I put stripes in at the end to make it kind of look like a landscape, different widths. And I don't have any open-ended shapes. You know, even the leaves, these raised triangle shapes are all closed in and filled. And so now it's ready to outline with the glue that's had some black acrylic paint added to. The reason why we want to have closed shapes is that it's going to not only mimic the stained glass and the leading that goes around each colored piece, but also the glue creates a little ridge, and so the watercolor will pool in that area. And a great part of watercolor is it blending together, which you probably already know. So real quick, you would take your glue, and if it's really, really full, you might have to let some of it go, and in that you want to make room to add some black paint and a little bit of water. And then I'm going to do a little magic in that I'm going to shake it, but I'm going to pick up my other container that I did this to earlier. And that way you have some black glue that's going to spread somewhat easily. If it's too thick, as you know, you got to work the edge and you have to squeeze kind of with an even hand, work flat. Look at that. It's going to be a nice black line. If it's not consistent, that means you might have to go back. But again, creativity is also about accepting happy accidents. I'll bet that was something that Bob Ross, the TV painter, taught us. So I'm going to pause again and do my outlines, and then I'll be back to show you where we're at. Okay, so there's a lot of squeezing going on, and it certainly has to dry flat. If it's starting to smear or sag, that means that you might just draw your shapes a little bit bigger. But once you start, you just got to keep going and accept what you get. Make those nice black outlines and then let it lay flat so that it can dry. Once it's dry, we're going to bring out our watercolor. It might take a couple hours. It might take a couple hours. If you're having a sunny day, you set it in the window, that's outstanding. And in the meantime, you know, while it's drying, whenever you use watercolor, the first ingredient of watercolor is water. So you could take a little time and preload, kind of wake up your watercolor. The word is to reactivate, because they're very, very dry, and we don't ever want to use them to look like house paint. They're supposed to be transparent, like stains. And so when we add water to these trays, we try not to touch the color so that we can get nice clear water in. And I would say you just about want to use every color that you've got. And that could sit while your drawing is drying. I'll be back one more time to do a little painting. But you know what to do too. It's about making it lovely to look at with bright colors moved around the spaces. And it's certainly the time to be inventive. If you use a little blue or purple on one side, try it on the other side. If you use your warms at the bottom, maybe you'll keep them just in one area. But that's the fun thing about color. It's infinite, and it's part of our job is to experiment. This is meant to be done in a very relaxed manner and to take your time, not to make it perfect, but just to enjoy the process. Okay, see you one more time. I found a hair dryer. Okay. It's almost dry. I used some of the excess paint to add some polka dots, and it looks like it's ready for color. I think my approach is going to be to start with the warm colors, the red, orange, and yellow, and place those. They'll be the accents. I really like that tradition of the blues and the purples and the greens, the cooler colors, to be dominant, to be the most used as an expression of that spiritual space. It's up to you though. You just take your time and fill in all the spaces on your page. And I'll show you one more time at the end of what I've come up with. And I'm really looking forward to the Facebook page for South Dakota Arts Council lessons so that you can submit yours. Make sure you title it, and that I know it's part of the spiritual stained glass. And if you want to talk about the symbols or colors that you used, you know how I was speaking about the heart or the cross, the roses, and the I'd like to know what thinking you came up with as you developed your design and your color choices. So thanks again for being so patient. Let's go in now and do the final, which is the color. So this is a different perspective. Maybe next time you can see my whole process. But the good news is, as long as we don't overwork it, it's a pretty straightforward painting assignment. If you don't have the glue and the black paint, I suppose you could use a black Sharpie. The only difference is the order. So you would draw it out on your paper, paint it, let that fully dry, and then go over your lines with a black Sharpie marker so it has the same outline. This is certainly covered with paint. It's almost dry enough to tip it up. Again, I want you to explore colors and shapes. I'm very pleased with a very simple heart and nature motif. There's certainly some choices I made about the greens going from dark to light, from the top to the bottom, and the warm colors, the red, orange, and yellow, sort of radiating out of the center. And again, the black outlines makes a nice sharp contrast. I hope you have some fun with this. And again, I look forward to seeing some of your creations online. Take care, and let me share one more thing. Yeah, that's the last of the, yeah, there's my thank you, my name, my contact information if you ever want to look at my work, or I also specialize in arts and health. These are my websites. And again, thanks for joining me in the spiritual state in class. Have fun.